So welcome to those who come for the first time to one of these FE Emerging Technology quarterly briefing sessions. You're very, very welcome. And if you're returning, you came to the inaugural one that we ran before in last year, then welcome back. It's great to see you. Since we're such a tight group today, which is wonderful, I'd love to go around the room, just understand who's here. Actually, I know a bunch of you, but it'd be nice just to say it. Can we keep it to about 10 seconds, 2-3 sentences tops, just a quick understanding of who you are, and then we can make sure that we're tailing appropriately for today. Pete, you're first on my screen. Would you mind 2 sentences?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So Pete Mansell, I run my own organisation that focuses on helping people adopt and use VR, virtual reality technology, both in the enterprise and wider kind of commercial space.
Thank you so much. I'll skip David because we'll come to you at the end of this. Alex?
Hello, I'm Alex. Nice to meet you all. Head of Insights and Analytics at MKAI, contributing to beautiful projects and initiatives, and looking forward to today's session.
And best friends with Milton Keynes College. Great.
Thank you, Richard.
Mark Colthorpe.
Hi, I'm Mark Colthorpe. I'm a 3D designer. Got into metaverse and XR design over the last couple of years, creating web VR spaces mainly.
Great, thanks, Mark. Jerry.
Hi, Happy New Year, everybody. I'm Jerry Kopich. I'm MKAI's Development Director.
Thank you, Tom.
Hey guys, first time here. Great to meet you. I'm CEO of Riot Digital, Tom Rafferty, and work closely with Dave on many projects in VR and IoT through to analytics. So yeah, first time session, looking forward to the discussion. Thanks guys.
First time caller, long time listener.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Tom. Beth.
Hello everyone, I'm Beth Snowden. I'm part-time EdTech lead here at Craven College, which is a rural college in North Yorkshire, and we're just starting out on our VR journey, so we're well behind the curve, but we're hoping to get 9 MetaQuest headsets, maybe a VR studio, so really excited to be here, and any advice gratefully received at the start of our journey.
Great. We just set that call up, David, don't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of ill health, Bill, have you been hearing? But we're all back now and we're strong, so we're ready.
Yeah, Beth, we will get back to you on that, absolutely.
Great. Ashton, do you want to say hello again?
Yeah, yeah, I'll do a quick intro. Yeah, I'm Ashton. I'm part of the Tesla Suit academic program team. We mainly focus on bringing our full haptics technology to the education market. We currently work with about 50 universities worldwide at the moment. Everyone from like Coventry to Oxford to obviously Milton Keynes, and so really focus on making sure that haptic technology involved in like virtual reality solutions are available to the academic market, especially because there's so much creativity within from the students to research projects, and it's really important that they have access to the tools that we have.
Thanks, Ashton. Beth, have you seen these Tesla suits?
I think I've seen an FE college, or I might have done. I've seen something online. I was just writing to Ashton there to say I was at the University of Leeds for 8 years, and they have the Institute of Immersive Technologies. So I've seen some haptic type stuff, and I wondered if he'd reached out to the University of Leeds doing anything there.
Yeah, they actually just bought some suits.
Oh no, missing out on all that excitement. Oh, you'll be working with some of my ex-colleagues then. Oh, that's great.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we had one of the, I think the guy who runs the Immersive Lab, Hossam, he kind of got in touch with us maybe a couple of months ago, and they've picked up a couple of suits, for their lab.
Ooh, right, great.
Small world, wonderful. So Mark's got some technical challenges, but as you can see in the chat, I'll just read this out very quickly. He's the Assistant Director of Curriculum at Newcastle at Stafford College Group. supporting the computing departments at both sites and delivering level 2-5 computing programs, and overseeing the IoT for Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent next year. And his email's in that message as well if you want to get in touch with Mark. Thank you so much for posting that, Mark. That's very, very helpful. David, are you there? David Monarchs?
Oh, yes. Hi, I work at Dudley College. I'm an outstanding practitioner for teaching and learning, but I've now kind of got the slant of digital on top of that. So again, I'm kind of on a fact-finding mission, really. I've met Beth yesterday in her GIST group. So hi, Beth. I'm suffering for a cold, so I'm not putting my screen on to scare you.
No problem. David, where are you based? Sorry, I didn't catch the college.
Sorry, Dudley College. So it's
Dudley,
West Midlands.
awesome.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Antonio, are you there? Maybe he's on listen only. And Christina, I saw that you joined. We just do sort of 2 sentences about who we are and what we do, if you don't mind.
Hi, I'm Christina Nicolai. I'm working at Bradford College as a curriculum team leader.
Great. Any experience with VR?
We're actually at the beginning of this journey. We've ordered some headsets, so we just want to learn a bit more.
You're in the right place.
We are. I think I called you a tech guru.
Oh, somebody used to work at Bradford College. Nice.
That's me. I was there for 14 years.
You know everybody.
I know. I've been in this field for a long time. Oh, Christina, that's a great link. I'll be in touch with you after.
Brilliant.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Wonderful. David, you better do your intro.
Okay, right. I am a technical director of a company called Riot Digital, which is realities in IoT. We specialize in helping big industries as well as further education and vocational training institutions utilize virtual and augmented reality and other forms of emerging technology. And I'm also a lecturer, and I've spent time lecturing in further education institutions. So I try to kind of keep both hats on and not bombard people with unnecessary information, because I know how busy you all are, because I used to be.
Great, thank you so much. I suppose I better just say who I am as well. I'm just going to put this link in the chat as well. So basically, we have an educational stream to the MKAI, which stands for Morality and Knowledge and Artificial Intelligence, but extends much further into other emerging technologies. Our brand new site, so don't point out any full stops that are missing. Right now is up and available to look at. So we partner with David and Co and Riot in terms of an end-to-end offering, from the advisory services around what to procure and from whom, and to get the best deals, support, maintenance, make sure you get kit that isn't just going to go out of date, how best to use it, right through to then onboarding internally and externally. So your digital teams, your leaders, your teachers, your IT staff, getting them not only familiar with the technology, but excited about the technology and what it can do, and getting them to be advocates for new programs like VR in colleges, not just VR, but we're talking VR today, through to the courses and workshops involving the students as often as possible, helping them to shine and show the technology and put them in front of potential employers of the future, and for the business communities as well. A lot of colleges that we work with have a commitment to the skills gap, particularly in smaller companies, and so we are very adept at putting on those kind of workshops, again involving the students, where we can get those business people into your spaces and coming up with ideas and ways to use the equipment, and making sure that anything that you buy, which ultimately is what we buy, we're all part of the tax-paying system and want to see it do its utmost, gets used and doesn't gather dust, and gets the maximum return that you would hope it would. Is that fair, David? Have I missed anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we try to do is, make those connections between the local industries around colleges and further educations, work out what their requirements are for employment now and into the future, and then match that up with the curriculum that you've got or the curriculum that you're planning to have, and then match the technology up to allow that. So that's usually the order that it's done. Demand first, then operations, then technology. And if given that Richard was talking about bridging the digital divide, it's not all about throwing expensive new tech at the problem. There's a lot of tech which is available and can be available at low cost to a large number of people. And it's about making it as available as possible. And also making sure that we can help you access the funding that would be required to get these things underway.
Yeah. That's a really good point about the funding. Yeah, we're working on a process as well to be able to put the funds in place through standard procedures that are available that some know about and some don't. And so, yeah, so it sounds like we could have another great conversation with Beth and maybe Christina too, to understand a bit more about the journey and where and when we might play a role in that. So most of all, welcome. Second of all, have your microphones on, your cameras on. This is not a webinar. This is a discussion, briefing, peer-to-peer space where we all learn from each other. David's our invited speaker today, but we do have Ashton here as well from TESSASU and Peter Mansell as well, who are happy to contribute to the dialogue and share their own experiences in VR and associated technologies. But David, whet our appetites a bit more. Some people are getting into this already in colleges, some it's a bit newer.
Yeah.
You know, why is this not just hype? Why is this really exciting in industry and education?
Well, there have been various hype cycles around virtual reality since going back as far as the 1970s, but we finally got to the stage where it's a usable technology. And the main reason for that is these mobile phones. They've given us affordable mass scale technology, which allows us to be able to create hardware for virtual reality, which people can carry around and buy. It's not too expensive, it works very well, it's very, very light, it's very, very small, and therefore it's possible. The other thing which has developed recently is the communications infrastructure to enable us to, for instance, go into virtual rooms together and, you know, on a normal mobile phone connection. And that therefore means that one of the main benefits of this technology is that it removes the barriers of geography. It used to be back in the day, and I remember the toughest crowd I ever had was when I went in and spoke to a bunch of higher education people at Glasgow University about how the pedagogical educational paradigm was coming to its close. And I went right back to hunter-gatherer, you know, mentorship training, you know, where you're meeting one-on-one, being shown how to strip a tree of bark or gut an animal or something like that. And then things went steadily more one-to-many, you know, the classroom paradigms that we're familiar with now. But now we're in a position where we can go back to this kind of mentorship approach of training. But you don't have to be physically in the same place as the person who's teaching you the thing. You can be anywhere. Also, it removes risk because you can teach people how to work in explosive environments, work at heights, confined spaces, offshore, and there's no risk. It's as realistic as some people will be unwilling to climb the ladder in virtual reality because they got vertigo and it triggers their vertigo. And that's good because you can then desensitize people to things that they're scared of, but it gives you an idea of just how realistic the experience is, but there is no risk. So it means that the other things that we can do is that we can use this technology to train people in a very, very low cost, environmentally friendly ways. An example might be augmented reality welding training. Welding training uses massive amounts of gas and metal and power, but you can do this using augmented reality welding jigs, which are the real thing. They feel right, you develop the muscle memory, but your welding helmet is actually giving you a virtual or an augmented reality experience of the welding. It's telling you what you're doing right with your angle and your speed and so forth, and it's telling you at the end what you could improve. Now, we've shown, in fact, I've got a video coming up in about a week, which shows me at Riverside College in Widnes, learning effectively how to do a basic weld in about 3 minutes. We did it on a real welder first. It was rubbish. We took 3 minutes on the VR thing, and then I went back on and I did a really good weld in reality. So it actually demonstrated how quick that can be. We're not seeking to replace this kind of practical training entirely with virtual and augmented reality. It's an addition. It augments it. It speeds things up. It reduces the amount of, as I say, expense and carbon footprint. But it really does help. But we would then seek to go into the practical training, and it's not just for practical training. There's systems out there like Body Swaps that teach people how to do soft skills, how to work and interact with people in the real world by placing them in virtual reality interpersonal situations, whether that be customer services or dealing with even people with suicidal ideations and psychological training. And then when you're finished, it shows you your performance from their perspective, a bit like having a mirror up in a ballet studio so that you can check your form. And it even uses artificial intelligence to check what words you used, what tonality you used. I mean, this stuff is so beneficial, so useful. The uptake is massive. But Beth, earlier on, you said that you're kind of, laggards in the curve, in the adoption curve here. You're not. There are a lot of people that are taking this up in further education, but there's lots that still haven't. We're all at the same stage of adoption, but training and education is the perfect way to engage with any new technology, because this is a very malleable industry. The industry of what we deliver likes to learn as much from you as possible, which is why we're here today. Rather than just say, we have this technology, use it. We want you to tell us what you need, what would make your jobs better and easier as lecturers, as colleges, as trainers for the skills of the employees of the future, and how we can then adapt our technology to fit what you require. So that's really why we're here today, 2 ears and one mouth.
Thanks so much, David. There's a couple of questions coming from Beth that I've noted, so we'll pick those up in just a moment. You mentioned about body swaps, and that's I've seen that in action in terms of one of the applications that's I think West Herts College has implemented that recently, haven't they?
That's right.
And it's tackling the soft skills. It's also tackling understanding, comprehension of more challenging areas above and beyond what we might necessarily expect to see on the curriculum, things like privilege in certain situations. But one thing that came up during the last session that we had with that college group was about learning styles in the classroom. We were hearing some pretty forthright opinions that for certain students with certain learning styles, this was making a huge difference to put VR into the classroom in terms of their learning, their engagement, their interest. Do you have any anecdotes or data that would support that?
Oh, absolutely. Here's one example. When there's numerous now virtual reality classroom environments out there. A lot of them started, in fact, we built one ourselves, but there's many others. A lot of them started during the pandemic because the Zoom fatigue issue was a real problem in terms of engagement. People had much lower engagement in this kind of format than they did in a real classroom. So we wanted to see whether we could engage people more by putting them in a three-dimensional environment. And we didn't know whether or not that would work, but we were really surprised by how well it did work. In fact, PricewaterhouseCoopers did an independent study where they discovered that the engagement levels were 4 times higher, in some cases even than the real world environment. The retention was certainly, again, 4 times higher than in Zoom environments. And people were engaging with us and staying engaged for longer periods of time, because we only worked out retrospectively, it was because their brains weren't having to convert 2D into 3D and back, right? So if you're in a 3D environment, that's really what our brains and our sensory apparatus evolved for, were developed for. So you're taking out quite a large burden by taking out that kind of conversion from looking at a flat screen to engaging in that way. And it means that what happened, that we found anecdotally, was that people were actually staying in and not realizing how long they've been in the environments. The amount of times that we with the system that we created with lecturers and students, and we would and if they told us they wanted something, we would add it, and if they told us we didn't want it, we would just remove it. We didn't second guess at all. And I didn't even think like a lecturer at this point. I was just there to do what they told us to do. But after about maybe 3 hours of being in the environment, we would ask them, how long do you think you've been in here? And the amount of people that came back and said, I don't know, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, the engagement was such that they lost track of time. They were that engaged. And the amount of confidence that they had in the training at the end was so much higher. Now, this is where we get into the specifics of neurodivergence and engagement for people with different sensory and mental requiremments. If you're in a normal classroom and you can't see, then you would require to have a scribe in that classroom with you, right? Now, there's a stigma attached to that, and there's also the resources that are required to have somebody come in and write things down for you. If you're in a virtual reality classroom, you can use speech to text or text to speech, and that will happen automatically. And that will happen on your tablet or whatever system that you're using, and nobody else in the class will see that. they'll just see you as a student. So there's no stigma. There's no requirement for your third-party individual. There's no, like, that person doesn't turn up, I can't do the class that day. It's all automated. So this can be done to turn the lecturer and the other student's speech into text for you for later, if you're hard of hearing, or you maybe have dyslexia, or you struggle to write at that speed. Or it can be used to convert text into speech if you're visually impaired. Now, another example was we were testing this in India, and one of the heads of education in a city in India, his son was kind of mid-range autistic spectrum, non-communicative, so he didn't speak. Part of the issue with that level and that type of autism that this kid had was that he would be overwhelmed by too much sensory input. Now, the beauty of taking him into a virtual reality classroom was that he could control the sensory input. He wasn't having to take in sight, sound, smell, and everything simultaneously. What we discovered was not only did he engage and start to engage verbally in that room within about 30 minutes, much to everybody's immense surprise, but after he came out of the virtual reality space, he continued to engage verbally for days. So not only was it enabling this student to actually have an environment that they had control over to the extent where they were comfortable enough and able to actually handle the sensory input, that lasted for longer afterwards. It put them into a space that they wouldn't have otherwise been in. So we're now engaging with some psychological studies more broadly to see where else this can be applied. A lot of this is purely accidental. We are entering into a whole new paradigm, a whole new world. A lot of this stuff is not what we were expecting, but we haven't had many unpleasant surprises, and we've had many very pleasant surprises.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I can kind of feed off that a little bit. Purely because me personally, I've been in virtual reality training for a long time, about 6 years, and then kind of jumping into test suit and haptic technology. We don't really have a specified area that we fit in. We do everything from kind of work with sports athletes to improve their technique, to actually working with children with physical disabilities, adults and children with special disabilities. Again, using haptic as a way to interact with a digital environment without them actually having to interact with keyboards, mouses, anything like that. So the suit itself, we've been in a few projects where it's actually been used as a controller, and allowing people who have minimal levels of movement to interact with classroom environments and content. So it's really important, actually, and that's something that's virtual reality and this immersive space is really, I think, in the future, and I think that's going to be the thing it tackles the best out of everything.
I would agree with that, because you can even, I mean, Tesla so even has the ability, because for instance, if somebody is a stroke victim, there's the potential for them to use the Tesla suit to stimulate the muscles for standing up, for instance, that they've lost the kind of automatic connection between the brain and the body that would allow them to just automatically know how to stand up. But Tesla suit, by being able to control muscles in a specific order, could potentially retrain them to stand up to the point at which the brain becomes familiar with that's the sequence and that's the order. And that's just one example of what can be done with haptic training. Also, not having to learn new specific, like for instance, when you were learning to use Zoom or Teams or whatever, when you guys were probably having to deliver training during the pandemic, that's a whole new thing that you have to learn. It's a whole new system that you have to learn. But if you're in a virtual reality environment and you're using haptics, or you're using something which knows your gesture and your body position, then you can just act like you're in a normal classroom. If you want to draw on a whiteboard, you walk over to the whiteboard and you start drawing on it. If you want to bring an object over, you just pick something up and take it over. I mean, you can scale it up and do all sorts of things that you couldn't do in the real world. But the fact is, if we get heuristics right, which we are, then you don't have to learn anything new. You just consider yourself in a classroom again and just do what you would normally do. So it's not a whole new set of skills to learn as an educator.
Peter, you're dedicating the next part of your career to VR. What particularly excites you and interests you to want to do that?
Yeah, good question, Richard. So I think there's a couple of things. One, I'd say the immersive experience in VR actually helps collaboration and creativity far more than any sort of video conferencing tool like we're using today on Zoom. So that's the that's the major benefit I've seen, and I've been deploying it inside enterprise environments. I used it in my previous organization. I'm now using it on a regular basis, and yeah, I would say that's the big thing, is that it brings teams that are separated geographically or even from different time zones together in one place, without the challenge of knowing who's going to talk when. It creates that immersive experience. You're all in VR and you can all collaborate. So I think that's the major benefit that I've seen, and one of the reasons why I've dedicated on it. I fully believe that virtual reality will be a new way to do both work and learning as we move forward. The technology is there, the devices are strong enough now and good enough and performance wise enough to make that difference.
And what are your reflections on students and getting access to VR? How important is it that they familiarize themselves, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity for any technology students around virtual reality, not only in using it to actually I guess enhance their learning experience, but also for future placement in the workplace, specifically around coding developments, creating environments. There's lots of opportunity, particularly around some of the code engines in VR that will give them plenty of opportunities going forward. So I think it's got a double benefit: help with the learning and also progress future career opportunities.
Great. Obviously, I know you'd have some strong opinions, but it's really good to hear them. And you're putting your money where your mouth is, aren't you?
Yeah. I think it's a great opportunity, right? And I think it genuinely, if you look at the Web 3.0 and the VR space, it's got some improvements to make, but it does generate a whole new experience. And I haven't met a person out there that's not tired of doing video conferences on Zoom and Teams. Yeah, so there's plenty of opportunity for VR to replace some of that.
Most definitely. Beth, I want to pick up on a couple of the things that you put. David, to a degree, answered your second question about impressive stats. I don't know if you wanted us to drill any more on that.
Sorry, Richard, I couldn't hear you there.
Yeah, my apologies. I think there's a bit of background noise. So I was saying to Beth, who raised a couple of questions, you spoke, David, didn't you, about some of the stats. You shared a PwC study about deeper, more effective learning. I just wanted to check in with Beth, see if there's any follow-up questions you had on that particular aspect.
No, that's great. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, David. Being obviously at the University of Leeds, when I'm talking to staff here, and I hear a lot of people who are experts in VR talk about deeper learning, and I want to read the article. I want to, when was that research done and what evidence do we have? So thank you for some of these links. I'll have a look at them later. That's great.
Yeah, and Ashley, if you've got anything that you can pop in the chat as well, that would be very well received. I see, David, you've put some of the use cases already. And then, Beth, you were saying about T levels for STEM subjects. Have you seen anything already that in that space?
Well, it's been quite hard, Richard, and I think there's a gap in the market, and everyone here, developers, that's what we're looking for, because if you look at kind of STEM subjects, Future Class from Estonia, I partnered with them last year, and they're doing some great work for GCSEs. Look them up. I might have mentioned it last time I was online, but their level is for secondary school students. So we know that in the FE sector, we are looking at T levels, so we're getting funding for T levels, but actually to try and find, especially for science, VR that fits that provision, I think is quite difficult. Now I can see David nodding his head, and I'm hoping that it's not just me who hasn't found this provision. Am I right in thinking that there's more development needs to be done there? Because I'm hoping to fund for some apps, and I'm just scratching around thinking, where do you start, really?
It's a very good question, Beth, and it's my kind of full-time job to find this information and find these courses as they emerge. We are lucky in the sense that with T levels, they're very much vocational and kind of employment ready kind of level skills. And we do, when we're not working with further and higher education, we're working with industry. So we're working with their training centres. So it's a very similar kind of training. Now, rather than being able to find, for instance, one organisation that's got a whole range of T-levels, we're generally having to get a bit from here, a bit from there, a bit from there. But I think that's good, because every organisation, every VR training development organisation has its strengths and its weaknesses. So it means that we can pick and choose the best bits from each of them. The only in some cases we have to say to them, look, there is a need for this. For instance, working with hydrogen. That's a massive growth area, but nobody's doing it. So we're then speaking to funding organizations and training organizations and accreditation bodies, as well as the training development people, and bringing it together with what's on the curriculum already. Can we make it fit for qualification? And then, okay, how do we then make this an actual virtual reality immersive training thing? We would generally reinvent the wheel. If something exists and it's good enough, we'll find it, vet it, and use it. But in some cases, we have to drive the market and say there are requirements. Just this morning, I was speaking to a training organization in Nigeria, and they have something like £400,000 worth of funding to develop switchgear and electrical transformer training in virtual reality, and renewable energy, specifically PV solar. Which again, there's a dearth of available. So that's an example where we're building it. Now, this does raise an issue, and it's a practical issue. Having been a lecturer myself, I do not want to have to navigate my way around loads and loads of different systems and then somehow get them to work with Moodle or your learning management systems, and also somehow get the information of who's trained in what and get it all into the headsets. It needs to be seamless. So what we've also been looking at is intermediary hubs, we call them. And the hub itself is installed either on the virtual reality headset or whatever device you happen to be using, desktop, laptop, phone. The students sign whatever training it is that they require, it's all connected to from this hub. So they can walk into an interpersonal skills, how to deal with engineers in the field kind of training, and then they can walk out and walk into a how to avoid getting knocked on the head by a falling spanner in an engineering environment training. And all of this will be gathered together, all the information that student will be gathered together in terms of what they learned, what they did, and the recordings and so forth, and shared into the one place. And as a learning facilitator, you can find all the information in one place as well.
David, you must get approached a lot by VR software companies who would like to be on your books, like to be a company that you recommend into education. How do you qualify? How do you choose a very small select number? Because you can't work with hundreds, can you?
Absolutely. Test and measure, Richard, is a very good question. So when I'm not out there actively searching for them and they're finding me, I'm vetting and vetting and vetting. Now, the best person to vet this stuff is initially me, because I can look at how good is the user interface? How easy is it to use? Is it got the heuristics that where like a door with a panel on it that says push and you know just to push? Yeah. Is it as simple as that, or is it something where you really have to be a kind of a techie to know what to do next? In which case, not good enough. And we'll tell them not good enough. And we'll tell them, okay, improve that and come back when you're ready. But then once I've taken it through the first phase of testing, I then take it to the actual end users. Not me, not people from my background, lecturers and students who have never involved. And I have to find new ones all the time, because as soon as they've got any familiarity with the technology, they're too familiar to be of use. It has to be an utter virgin to the technology, and they have to get it straight away. And if they don't, it's not good enough. And we'll always feed back and provide detailed feedback to the developers, because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There might be brilliant training material, it might be a great system, it just needs tweaked, but we feel that we occupy an important middle ground between those who just want to ram a square peg into a round hole. They built a thing and they want to sell it, and those who need the thing to be fit for purpose right out of the box. Because like I say, I've been in FE, I've worked in it, I didn't have time to think, much less work out how this complicated newfangled system worked, much less teach all my students how this complicated newfangled system works. It needs to just be natural, it needs to work, and it needs to be fit for purpose. So that's really my job.
There's quite a lot of headsets out there, but the colleges that we've been speaking to and spending time, they seem to be all buying similar hardware. Do you want to say what that is and why that might be?
Sure. A lot of it's to do with costs and a lot of it's to do with awareness. So a lot of people are buying things like the Meta Quest headset because it's cheap, because they're aware of it, it's got a lot of marketing, and because there's quite a lot of apps and so forth out there. There are certain disadvantages to that one because Meta is Facebook, and Facebook is an advertising company. They make their money from your data. So in order to use a Meta Quest, largely speaking, the reason it's as cheap as it is it's a subsidized data gathering device. Do you want a data gathering device with your students? Do you want something gathering data from your students without their knowledge of it? Do you want it to know who they are, where they are, what they're doing? Probably not. Now it's getting a little better because we're really lobbying hard with governments across Europe to make sure that that is not what happens, and that's why a lot of the people are giving out the doom and gloom forecasts about, oh, metaverse isn't making as much money as they thought it was going to make. That's because we've stopped them from making money out of your data. So there are other systems out there. There is the HTC, which are good organization, much more expensive, but basically you are buying a headset which does what you need it to do. It's not subsidized in any way. And there's another company called Pico, and they do a device which is very, very similar to the Meta Quest, but again, a little bit more expensive, doesn't hoover up your data. Those are the ones that we're seeing most often.
Yes, and just to speak on your behalf, I suppose as well, there's quite a bit to think about with those devices, isn't there, in terms of security and safety. Mobile device management is still quite challenging for these devices, and different for each device as well. So just to remind people, I mean, that's what you're here for, isn't it? And that's the kind of consultancy advisory that together we bring, isn't it?
Shall I highlight to everybody what we mean by mobile device management? Because that might not be a term they're familiar with. So MDM, or mobile device management, can be applied to any device from a mobile phone to a tablet to a laptop to, of course, a virtual reality headset these days, because they are what we call untethered. They're not connected to anything, so they are a mobile device. Mobile device management is, if you are an organization or an institution, you want to know where these devices are, because things have a habit of going walkies from colleges. I've seen it before, people coming in high-vis vests and removing the projectors from your rooms and so forth. So we look into systems which monitor where is the device, what is it being used for, how much data is being used, is it running out of batteries? Now that has many, many uses. First of all, if somebody steals it, we know that it's left the area that it's meant to be in, so we can shut it off. We call it bricking the device. It turns it into a very expensive brick. There's no way it can be used, and we can still track it. So you can get it back, and nobody has any value from stealing the thing in the first place. It's a bit like saying no cash is stored in the premises overnight in a shop. It discourages people from buying it in the first place if you put that sign on it. The other advantage is, if you are, many of you probably won't have encountered this, but if you're trying to teach even one, let alone 2 or 3 or up to 30 people on virtual reality, and they're struggling to know what to do next, you can't see what they see. So how can you guide them? Now, the good thing about some mobile device management systems is that they can actually transmit what the student is seeing to your laptop, so you can guide them. No, I need you to click on that thing up to the top left. No, not that. Yeah, that. There you go. Now that is so much easier than having to take the thing off them and do it yourself. So it really does make a big difference. So there's security. There's also, it can tell you if there's something wrong with the device. There's also, it can upload new software and updated software to the device. And also it can manage if you've moved the device from one classroom to another, it knows, and it can say, okay, well, this classroom that you've moved it into is only going to be using it for these subjects. So it then puts it into what we call kiosk mode. It only will show the students the subjects that are relevant to them for that location, that time, or that class. So you don't have to. So it makes life a lot easier.
I think maybe just to add to David's point on the device piece, I think, yeah, certainly the Quest 2 from Meta is by far and away the most used device, mainly because of the price point. So that I mean, that's definitely relevant. That's the one we've done most of the development on in the software company that I'm partnering with at the moment. But there is also a lot of innovation coming the way in the device market, and I think that's in two areas. I'd say one is in usability to reduce the bulkiness of devices and extend battery length. So that's a big enhancement that you'll see from some of the new devices out on the market. And then I think the second thing is exactly what David was talking around, the security piece. So for example, Meta are about to release a business version of their headset that will link in with Intune as an Active Directory and authentication security tool. So those are probably the big enhancements that you'll see in the headset criteria. One, usability, and two, linking with kind of business systems that provide that security. That's what we see. And we hopefully got Apple entering the market within the next 4 to 6 months, and that will certainly shake things up as well. So there's plenty of options.
Absolutely. And Peter, those points are very true. And actually some of the other new forms of technology that are coming in is what we've been talking about thus far is virtual reality, where when you put on the headset, you're entirely immersed in a digital world. Now, some people are uncomfortable with this, and some people can even still get a little bit nauseous from this. The new innovation is augmented reality or mixed reality. And that means that the user can still see the physical world around them, and it's overlaying a digital layer on top of that. Now that can be as immersive or as light as you wish it to be, but because the person can see the horizon, a bit like when you're on a ship and you feel seasickness, if you get on deck and you look at the horizon, it makes you feel better. This is the same, so it helps with the nausea issue, but it also helps with that almost claustrophobia inducing or self-consciousness inducing issue with the headsets, because they can see everybody around them, they don't feel separated. And that also has some amazing advantages and opportunities because it can contextualize the data with what they're seeing. So I'll give you an example. You could put somebody in a room with a let me think. One of the places that we went into had a 16-foot tall distillation unit. But to operate that 16-foot tall distillation unit would take megawatts, well, certainly many, many kilowatts of energy to run, and you could only do it once a day. On the other hand, that person can go and interact with this distillation unit, touch the handles, move everything around, and you could have the augmented reality make it appear as if it's running as many times as you want without ever actually physically running, and it will behave exactly as it would in real life. So that is just one example. I don't know, Peter, you might have some other examples of where AR can be used in these kind of environments.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really going to be a blend of AR and VR. So you'll start to see devices that can do both, right? Which is the horrible term of XR, right? So I think you definitely see a blend of devices, and the reality is what we need to do is drive some of those barriers down, and certainly, you know, if we look at the augmented reality, that's fantastic for factory environments, for safety scenarios. All of those can play a really important part in that technology.
That's a good point. We developed something for Perfetti Van Melier. They make Chupa Chups, amongst many other things. And they have some big, heavy machinery that they have to train people up on very, very quickly in the environment. And there's also some people that were developing CNC lathe training in Rolls-Royce. And we used those kind of headsets so that you could walk in and it would tell you, don't touch this. Do this first, step back when this is happening, and you know, and it would tell you, and it would even use AI to tell you whether or not the thing was ready for function yet, and to alert you to what wasn't. And so there's lots of examples, lots of videos, examples, if anybody's interested, that we can forward on, where this has been used. And again, this has been driven by industry, which is perfect because we can take those learnings back into the vocational training environments so that your students are actually ready for using it by the time they graduate, or even ready to lead.
Sorry, Dave. Yeah, I've got a bit of an anecdote in terms of that. I've worked a lot with construction companies, and the construction industry is typically, like probably a lot of industries, is quite backwards in their design and processes. But one thing they have done for a long time is build 3D models of everything they do. Now, let's say the immersive industry has been trying to push them towards looking at using those 3D models for everything they do. So the UK market typically in the construction industry is known for doing 80% building, 20% planning. And that leads to a lot of issues in terms of building. There's designers not being happy with the architects not being happy with the construction teams not being happy with the architects, etc., and everyone losing track of what they're trying to do in the process. And then eventually gets up to the trainers. So what I've been pushing personally in a lot of the roles I've been in, and been actually successful in a couple different places like Bouygues construction, is taking them from using that 3D model that they have, which is normally called BIM, and then transitioning that from the designers into the architects. So the designers and architects are sitting together and going, does this work? Does this work? Then taking that from the architects into the construction teams, and the construction team telling the designers, actually, that won't work. And them using a combination of VR and AR. So a construction team and the architectural team might sit in VR and go, does that work as a structure in real life? But also they'll go out to the environment where they're building the actual the building itself, and then use an AR, use a device like an iPad, etc., and look at the structure of that building through AR and walk around it together, and then get an understanding of whether this building will work again in this environment in real life, and then transitioning that same 3D model from that architectural team to the construction team, and actually eventually out to the marketing team and the sales team to then use that as promotional tools for their for their obviously the sales and marketing schemes for the consumers that eventually buy the buildings, which obviously allows them to have much more informed decisions when deciding to buy an apartment that is not going to be built for the next 4 years, but also allows them to have more faith and trust in what they're going to be purchasing. And then actually finally out to the construction teams who are going to build it, they are able to train in those environments that haven't been built yet, so that when they actually get to building eventually in the end, it becomes a much obviously better structure. So it's, yeah, as you said, it's a mixture of using AR, VR, and actually 3D models, which all kind of come together as as digital content, and using that throughout the cycle of the construction process. And obviously that works within a variety of different industries and not just construction.
That's a brilliant anecdote, though, and you're absolutely right. It's being used. Construction has been a big adopter of this, because they have the 3D models, because they have the BIM systems that they've been using. But even as long ago as about 6 years ago, Bell Aerospace, who built helicopters, were able to take a concept from concept to production in 6 months using virtual reality. It would normally have taken them 6 years, because they were able to take a pilot, put them in a virtual reality environment, say, what do you think of the design? And the pilot would say, these windows aren't good enough, I can't see the ground from here. And they would go, okay, I'll just tweak it. Okay, is that any better? Good. Now that process would normally they would have had to build prototypes and get it to the stage of putting the pilot in a physical prototype, which would take months before they could then tweak it back. But this can be done in minutes. So it dramatically reduces that. And then when you were saying about it, these same models can be used for loads of different purposes, from design to maintenance to safety to marketing. That's exactly what we were asked about from the automotive industry just recently. And I know a lot of your colleges are near to automotive manufacturer hubs. They want to use the same models that they use for manufacturing and design for marketing. Now, this is great for your students, because they may find that actually the thing that they most engage with, they most resonate with, isn't maybe the design side, it might be the marketing side, or it isn't maybe the maintenance side, it might be the development side. And it gives them a chance to try all of this out in context. And it also means that these different mindsets, these different training styles, these different professions can all be in these virtual environments, talking together in their own languages, but understanding things from each other's contexts. And again, I think it was Peter who raised this earlier on. Distance and geography are no longer an issue as well. So for those of your students who are remote students, for those of for people who are wanting to work remotely, it can all be done from anywhere. You can join each other in these hubs.
Wonderful. I'll jump in because we've got just over 2 minutes on the clock, and we do like to finish on time. I think a little summary, David, if we don't mind. So first of all, thank you for all the contributions that have come through today. For those who've been a bit quieter, I hope it's been very valuable. We certainly started the session with 15 and we're finishing with 15, so I can make some assumptions about that. So well done, David, for keeping us interested, entertained, and educated throughout this last just under an hour. I think we're talking a lot about the opportunity. I mean, I think it's a certainty really. So of course we want to get VR ready, and we want our students to be VR ready. I think there are some areas that can catch you out. I think there are some gotchas. I mean, we've already talked about it, but you know, the Quest, it's a consumer device. It's a Christmas present. You know, that comes with complications to put it into the academic or business world when you need to put the safety and security in place. It's not trivial. It's quite challenging. And so I guess in summary, you know, we're here first and foremost in these sessions to be useful, to be valuable, and provide the latest updates and insights around emerging technologies with a different focus each time. So you'll hear from us again. You know, please come back next quarter and we'll talk some more. But I think we do play, our companies play a pretty important role, David, and you'd expect me to say that, but
I would say
naturally suits a hand-holding partnership, I think, doesn't it, this kind of area?
Absolutely, it needs to be beans to cup because it's a major undertaking, this kind of technological or digital transformation that these colleges are going through, that you're going through. And given that it's what we do full time, it makes sense to handhold because you're entering a whole new and constantly changing world. This cost savings alone can be astronomical if you just go for the stuff, for instance, which maybe last year cost thousands of pounds per unit and this year costs hundreds, if you know that that's the case. In fact, we did one group recently where we would be able to save them about 2 million out of a 3 million budget. So just by having a bit of more up-to-date information and leveraging with the manufacturers, surely you want these students to know this stuff because then they can go out into the industry and promote your stuff, so there's that. But like Richard said at the start, the onboarding, the ensuring that everybody knows how it works, the ensuring that it doesn't just end up gathering dust in a cupboard and you end up looking bad for making an investment which didn't pay off. That is what MKAI do really, really well, is make sure that these things are used and used properly.
Yeah, okay. We're at 3 o'clock. Any closing words from anybody before we shut down the session? No? Okay, well, I've certainly enjoyed it. And I'm going to kick out of my room. So thank you so much. And we'll speak soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
See you at the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.